Hey, Mr. Binks, you know how we were chatting to Carol Hughes about the microbiome last week? Well, I'm delighted to say she's back for a much deeper investigation on how specific bacteria are almost missing these days from a dog's microbiome and why this really is potentially very serious. I'm Anna Webb. Welcome to A Dog's Life. Carol Hughes, welcome back to A Dog's Life.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Thank you.
I was so excited in our first conversation that we had. So I'm really pleased that you're back. So I felt that there was so much more to talk about, not least really your own journey to get to being so interested in the microbiome.
Yeah. Do you know, I was thinking about it because I knew we were going to be talking about this particular subject. And it's one of those things that partly happened by accident and also partly happened because of the environment, of our interest in the environment and how we kind of develop a circular economy, which seems very far removed from dogs, horses, health, the microbiome, but it's actually quite entwined. And we actually started from researching plant compounds, active plant compounds with health benefits that could be extracted from a native plant species that we could use as a type of medicine. And there's a huge interest in that in Wales, and it was quite well funded by the Welsh Government. So it was a very vibrant community and a very exciting one to be part of. And if I can just give you an example of what we were doing at the time that led us onto the microbiome, we actually researched a steroid compound from spinach. And it also comes from, is it quinoa, quinoa, whatever, however you want to say it.
Yes, I know.
You know what I mean? But
I know.
the
It is quinoa, isn't it? Although for years I called it quinona.
yeah, no, I've called it many things. And the point of that was that's a food for people in a poor country, and it has such high value that it's easy to kind of take that away from those people, those indigenous people, and make a lot of money out of it because it's a health product. So it was our job not to take the quinoa, even though that had high levels of this steroid we were after, but find some kind of hardier, more wild plant or a part of a plant that was being farmed that was waste, to be able to extract this compound out of it. So we actually looked at spinach, and spinach seeds have a high level of this steroid. So we were kind of taking the seeds from a manufacturer that didn't have a use for them and the root. We were extracting the plant compound, and then we were stabilizing it and putting it into animals. And the purpose of the compound was to lose weight, was weight loss. So it was attractive in that it was an anti-obesity compound, and that's what got us into dogs. Initially, it was trying to work out whether the compound passed over the gut barrier, and that was all the big deal in those days. It was, well, will this thing work? Will it go into the blood? Will it do whatever it needs to do? But first of all, it's got to get over the gut wall. So for that, you had to take blood tests, and you also had to put dogs in cages. And at the second stage of the test, the taking of blood from dogs and putting them in cages was actually really not on for us at all. So we kind of went, well, that's that then. That's the end of the road for this weight loss compound that we'd already trialed live in vet practices and with pet food manufacturers, and it was going really well. But at the point we had to put dogs in cages, that was it. And then we were introduced to Professor Newbold, and he said, well, you don't have to worry about it going over the gut wall. What we have to talk about is what effect does it have on the microbiome, because that's where everything happens first. And I was a bit disappointed, to be honest, and I didn't really understand any of it anyway, but it was free. The Welsh Government were funding it. So for 4 years, we've started off looking at the microbiome, and gradually, because my knowledge increased and the technology got better, I was absolutely fascinated to discover that that was actually the truth, where food from the outside meets the inside. It all happens in the gut first. So that's the start point. And it's such a powerful start point. We just began to learn more from that, how it affected so many different things. And that was us. We were off on that journey from the microbiome first.
Wow. So, in a way, would you call yourself a herbalist as well? I mean, or not? Oh, have I, in terms of
No,
the
I,
phyto aspect?
I think the herbalist side, I think it's fascinating. Plants fascinate me, and I think for sure plants and the microbiome and the soil go together better than any drug or anything else. That the effect is massive on the microbiome. But I'm wondering, with herbalism, you don't kind of target into specific how specific compounds help in a particular area. You're more involved in the whole plant. And I think that's fantastic because the whole plant is great.
Mm,
But
mm.
the plant does contain specific antimicrobials. So the more you learn about that antimicrobial in a herb and how that will affect those bacteria in the gut, then you've got a chance of just rebalancing the gut before the rest of the plant goes on to do whatever it needs to do elsewhere. And because the microbiome is under such pressure and such attack, and the changes are so massive, that I think you've got to start there for sure.
Yeah, I mean this compound in spinach, I mean, it is fascinating. I mean, everyone knows spinach makes you strong, according to
Popeye.
Popeye. It's a great leafy green, as a nutritionist. I've pulverized spinach over the years, loads, and the science does concur. It is a very strong polyphenol that can keep cancer at bay and really enrich the cells and balance a lot of toxins in the body. But you see what you're saying there, I'm so fascinated. So finding a compound that would act like a steroid, but a natural steroid. I didn't even know you
Yeah,
could get natural steroids. I've always,
yeah,
I thought steroids are pharmaceuticals, one of the very few tools in a conventional vet's toolbox that often do more harm than good. So
yeah,
to even know that there is this natural steroid is blowing my mind. But I suppose the way it fuses in with the microbiome is to see how this particular compound, am I right, is perhaps creating a set of bacteria in the biome or altering other bacterias in the microbiome
yeah.
to perform more efficiently in terms of the achieved goal being weight loss.
Yeah, for sure. I think it triggers a pathway called the AKT pathway. It's an energy pathway, um, and you have to extract the compound. I am a massive fan of the whole plant, but specifically for manipulating the biome, it's it's useful to be able to extract it. So the steroid is called a 22-ecdysterone 2-acetate, and it does trigger a particular pathway. So scientists have looked at that pathway because there is an interest in making drugs from plants, except they do tend to fall apart at the point where they need to synthesize the compound to make money at it. They seem to fall down at that place. So the journey of the plant compound is one of discovery from science, but at the point before it can make it onto the market, it's difficult to patent and difficult to synthesize. But as part of that, we've learned a lot on the journey. So we tend to use the compound at 98% pure, and in a wild plant, it's maybe only at 0.5% for wild spinach, and maybe at 2% in other plants like quinoa. So being able to get it 98% pure is great. And we can use it at that level to make a difference to the microbiome. It's also quite interesting because it will tell you if what you've got going on in your own microbiome. If you've had a really, if you're into, say, Greg's, I don't mean to be, but processed food, high carbs, high processed food, the plant compound actually tastes bitter to the point that it may make you vomit. It's so powerful. But if you have a kind of diet that's quite high in plants, a good diet, good, sort of diverse diet, it actually tastes like caramel. So isn't that interesting? And what it does, it's part of the quorum sensing part of the microbiome. So it's talking, the actual plant compound, it's actually an insect molting hormone. So it's telling the body to do something, and it works through the adipose tissue, of which animals have, obviously, adipose tissue. So it's talking to the adipose tissue, and it does have such an instant effect on the body. And it's a great test, if you taste it and it tastes like caramel, well, you're doing really well.
Gosh, I mean, this is so do you sell this, Carol?
Yeah, we do. We do. Yes, we do. We've been researching it since 2014. We started in race horses because if trainers gave sort of steroids, synthetic steroids, if that's the way I can put it, it does make a big difference. There are lots of side effects, but a natural plant compound, there aren't. So we still, and also you don't fail a dope test of taking a natural plant. So that's where we started. And then we went on to do weight loss studies in dogs and horses. So yes, we do sell it, but it's not really that interests us
No.
massively.
I just find this so interesting in terms of perhaps the future as well of the vet profession, that plant compound could be used in lieu of, as you say, a processed steroid. But it's so interesting. So now I totally get a much clearer picture of how you ended up there with all of this great knowledge of the microbiome, because you said in the last episode, and I was presented with microbiomes, and there was such a clear picture and a clear structure of the microbiome. That interests me as well, because obviously when you get really focused into anything, it becomes your thing. It's interesting how you're describing it, that you can really look at a microbiome using your technology that you do in the laboratory, and you see a picture. The information is, I'm sure you can tell the dog's age. You mentioned in the last episode, you can tell from the biome if the dog's been neutered or not. You can tell from the biome the diet the dog's been eating. And I'm sure you could tell from the biome certain allergens that are maybe in the dog. Or tell me more.
Well, I think when you look at the microbiome of a dog, we do look at other animals, but the dog, I guess, out of all the animals, interests me the most, because it does seem to be more vulnerable to change from environmental changes or changes from its owner. I know we'll talk about that at some point, or from medicines. So when you look at the microbiome, I always tend to imagine it being a city. And I kind of imagine, I suppose, somewhere like Singapore, a big sort of fairly glamorous city with kind of lots of lovely buildings and lots going on, a very busy city. And while you're looking at it that way, you understand that there has to be an infrastructure, and the infrastructure may not be the dominant part of the biome. It may be under 3% of the biome, but in that under 3%, you're going to have some very clever bacteria, I guess, for want of a way of saying it, that can talk to the host, and that can make a lot of difference through different, like the gut-brain axis. And then the sort of bigger parts of the biome, you need them to contain bacteria that digest food, different components of the food. And then you need part of the biome that will digest protein and things that will, say, digest bone. So in the dog, I think it's probably very clear that you need all these different aspects. So when something is out of sync, say you've got high levels of antibiotic resistant bacteria, it kind of stands out like a sore thumb, because you look at it and you've just got great gaps in this infrastructure and this kind of parts of the city. They don't exist. So it really does stand out. And it makes it easier to look at, but also it's quite hard to look at it because you can understand quite quickly why the dog might have problems, and the problems are multiple. That I think the dog probably has more problems than any other animal we look at.
Well, that's very sad, isn't it? Very
Yeah,
sad.
it
Very
is.
sad. Also, I mean, gosh, so because it's, I mean, everybody spays and neuters, and it's interesting how in Norway it's actually illegal to spay and neuter. So, which puts quite a different perspective on everything, really. I know you mentioned that your plumber terrier is entire.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my Prudence, my bull terrier, is entire as well. She's actually in season at the moment. It's not the easiest 3 weeks of the year, I
No,
will,
no, it
but
isn't. I know, no, you're right.
not with Prudence. I mean, with other girl dogs, it's not a big deal, but I mean, she's always a problem no matter what. She's got a very strong personality. So it's all magnified, it's all relative, as they say. So anyway, it's interesting because there's a lot of research was shared at the London Vet Show, actually, amongst the vet community about
Yeah.
the dangers of spaying and neutering, just at the last London Vet Show, actually.
Oh,
And
great,
yeah,
great.
well, yeah, I don't think it was awfully well received.
Oh, no,
Well,
right.
I don't know. And it stirred things up a bit, I think, to be honest with you, arguably raising questions as to why vets are so keen to spay and neuter, because it's not covered by an owner's insurance. So, there's quite a big conversation there. Spaying and neutering, let's face it, what this research proves, and what you're suggesting also, Carol, with the biome, is that spaying and neutering certainly doesn't do anything to help the dog's health.
No.
So, you have to ask yourself then, why is it almost mandatory? I mean, I do have people ask me, is it mandatory? Because vets are so keen to do it. So,
Yeah.
this is why I think your findings with the microbiome could really augment the studies that have been done in America, and proved really quite scary figures on the amount of dogs that die of cancer that are spayed and neutered, that
Yeah.
that I've talked about, actually with Dr. Lise Hansen on this podcast a few times, because she's Danish. So she gets it that in Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, most dogs are not spayed and neutered compared to how they are here and in America,
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah. I know, absolutely. Well, in Norway, it's illegal. A vet won't do it
Oh,
unless there's,
wow.
yeah, it's actually true.
Yeah, wow, brilliant.
Yeah, I know. What interests me is this, that you've got a huge amount of research here, knowledge of the
Yeah.
biome. How would you like to share this? And how do you think vets would like to learn about it?
Um, oh gosh. Well, it's got a name. It's called a microgenderome, the link between the sex hormones receptors in the gut and the brain. And I think one of the big things, it depends how important you think bifidobacteria are, because I think that's the core to this. The spaying changes or creates a dysbiosis in the gut, and it reduces the good gut bacteria, um, for sure. And what's interesting about the dog, one of the good gut bacteria called bifidobacteria, which is a good gut bacteria in anybody's book, human, elephant, fish, anything. And in the dog, it reduces bifidobacteria to the point that some researchers are suggesting that the dog doesn't need bifidobacteria. Now that's quite worrying to me because bifidobacteria is the prime conversation the gut has with the immune system. And by spaying or neutering, you're reducing them to sometimes 0.01%. I mean, that's what in some dogs, that's what they have. They have nothing. Um, it doesn't seem to help giving them probiotic that's a bifidobacteria because the species, or not enough, and also maybe what's the point? If you didn't spay them, they'd have their own levels, and those levels would be natural to the microbiome. So what they should have, if you look at what wolves and unspayed animals or unneutered animals, it's around 2%. So if you've gone from 2% to 0.01% or 0.02%, that's such a loss. So you're already compromising the immune system and leaving the dog open to some diseases that it would be able to deal with if you didn't spay them.
Wow.
And I think that for me is enough, really. Bifidobacteria are massive in anyone's book, and to have an animal with none, just in such low levels, why, it's obviously going to make a big difference to the health of the animal.
This is so interesting. So why would supplementing with the bifido not work?
I wish I knew, because I'd love to be able to say you need to give that. And in fact, to start with, we did say that, but it didn't make any difference. So I'm presuming there's something we don't understand about how the communication, the signals set up. And that if they are spayed or neutered and you've dysregulated the luteinizing hormone and the receptors in the gut, maybe it's too late. Maybe you just can't change that dynamic, which is quite sad, really. But we haven't very successfully. Sometimes we can change it a little bit, but definitely the difference between dogs that are neutered or spayed and those that are entire is quite large.
Gosh,
It's significant.
yeah, absolutely. It is interesting, actually. So interesting. Okay, more questions, Carol. Gosh, that leaves people really spinning, I think. It's left me but not sideways, actually, on that front. How scary. You're really removing. But that's the whole thing about the spaying. You are removing not something that's just, for reproduction, but a whole real active chunk of your dog's being, essence, metabolism. And that's always just been sort of postulated, but this gives it more evidence, So this is really interesting. So similarly, with the biome, when you're looking at it, can you tell if a dog has had a lot of particular medication, for example? Because obviously antibiotics, we all know, even in humans, that your microbiome is affected, and you're always recommended to take probiotics to balance the antibiotics. But is that going to work with the dog?
No. We've done a lot of longitudinal studies, and we've done it with horses. Now, for some reason, horses recover maybe within sometimes 9 days. They'll recover their microbiome, not massively, but enough to get by. But for some reason, dogs don't seem to respond that way. They seem to have just large chunks of the biome go permanently missing, particularly the proteobacteria, so the bacteria that digest protein, and also that house the bad boys, the true pathogens that I actually quite like, because
we all like a bad boy.
Yes, we do. We do. I'm quite fond of proteobacteria, but I know a lot of people may not be. But it gets rid of all of those, and the microbiome just looks completely imbalanced. But it reminds me of what happened during COVID. Taking antibiotics is very much like when we noticed the difference in the microbiome during the COVID lockdown, or I don't know whether dogs got COVID. We never really, kind of pursued it we couldn't find an answer at the time because we're limited resource-wise, but at least we noticed it changed, and we can keep working on it and see what it's all about. But there was a point during that COVID lockdown where the microbiome completely changed, and it changed so much that our rules-based report writing didn't work anymore. It just didn't. There were so few good gut bacteria and huge chunks of these kind of antibiotic resistant and inflammatory bacteria that the reports no longer made sense. since then, so we had to write a kind of special bit of the report and say, look, we think this is associated. We've been doing this for a long time, and this is a massive change across the board. And we think it's maybe caused by this, this, and this. And then we just had to keep our fingers crossed to see whether it would recover. And it has, maybe 30% of dogs have recovered, but we're still seeing that kind of empty microbiome that happened, during that first lockdown.
Gosh, because I know you wrote a piece for Vet Times
Yeah,
about a particular strain of bacteria that you found at the time, of the first lockdown, which was a bacteria that was linked in humans to
yeah,
COVID-19.
yeah,
So was it that one you're referring to?
yeah,
Or
yeah.
yeah.
No, but for sure. And I think we were looking at stuff that was coming out of China of people that were in hospital with COVID, and the ones that were recovering, that were very seriously ill but recovering, had this profile of the microbiome that was very similar to the ones that were coming out of the dogs. But to this day, I'm really just not sure why. And I guess to me, I'm sort of feeling it maybe because we've used antimicrobials, maybe hand sanitizers, or maybe people haven't mixed and the microbiome has got weaker. But I don't know for sure. It could be a protective mechanism by the biome for a particular reason, and we just don't know enough about it at the moment to take the call. But it certainly reduces diversity, so I can't think that it's a good happening. I'm leaning more towards the fact that the biome was emptied because of antimicrobial use of some kind, and it hasn't recovered yet, which is a bit similar to them taking antibiotics. It looks a bit similar.
Wow, even if the dogs hadn't taken antibiotics.
No, no. I think at the time when we were sort of saying to people, well, look, it looks like you've had antibiotics, and I think a lot of people were quite cross, really. And I kind of get it. But we just have to report what's happening. We can't,
Mm.
um, when you're at the forefront of discovery, you just have to be straight and you have to go with what's the information that's coming in. That may not be where you end up, but it's the start of the journey, and you have to report the facts, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is what you're doing by looking at this, and it's almost that you are looking at the truth,
Yes, yeah,
and then you have to work backwards to work out, or maybe this could be related perhaps to a general anesthetic the dog
yeah,
had 5 years ago. I mean, could that be possible?
yeah, yeah. I think there are so many assaults. The horse seems to bounce back. I mean, that's the other animal we do a lot of, and ruminants. They all
Mm.
seem to bounce back, but dogs don't quite so well. And I wish I could just put that over to people that, you know, when you get your dog, you've got a crisis. You have an internal crisis already there. Um, and I wish people could just understand that invisible part of the microbiome and the link to the environment, because it's something, if you can't actually see it with your eyes, maybe it's too hard to take in. Um, but it's the thing that controls the health of the dog, isn't it? It's the most important part.
Yes, gosh, gosh, gosh. So, have you ever compared puppies' microbiomes, from perhaps puppies that were
Yeah,
weaned to raw food and puppies that were weaned to, kibble, for example?
we haven't done to kibble, we've done raw, and we've done puppies, and have much higher levels when they're in the early days of bifidobacteria. So that kind of backs up the feeling that the bifidobacteria are important at some point, and then they go missing at some other point later on in life. There is that clear distinction. And I think that when you're eating raw, not only are you feeding bifidobacteria, but you're also feeding kind of mucin and blood digesting bacteria, which are really strong components of the immune system. And that's quite clear, as well as the fecal bacteria, which protect the gut protect the gut wall integrity. You're also feeding them when you feed raw as a puppy.
Yes, and we touched on a fecal implant or transplants
Yeah,
in the last episode, which is quite a new way of kind of bringing a dog back to life when everything else has failed. But something that's interested me, you know how some dogs eat their own poo?
yeah,
Do you, do you think, you know, nobody really gets why? I mean, it's the old instinct to cover their tracks, you know, eat fox poo so
yeah,
that, you know, the fox isn't going to find them. But
yeah.
could it be to enhance their microbiome?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of. I think that's my favorite probiotic. Is That's just terrible, isn't it? To think of it like that. I
No,
think they do it for that reason, and because the microbiome is talking to the brain, and it's also causing uh, the body to sense what it needs. And I wonder why we don't actually trust that, as one of the sensors, if you like. I mean, I get so many people that say, "Well, my dog's allergic to chicken, or it's allergic to this, or it's allergic to that." It's because the microbiome can't digest what it needs. It hasn't got the bacteria in there to be able to digest particular types of food. So if it can get it from another animal or another source, it kind of makes sense that they would do that. To me, soil as well, if they're digging up a bone and burying it, they're going to get a lot from soil, but only if it's healthy soil. If it's sprayed with pesticide or any other agrochemical, you're not going to get the microbiome from there either. So I guess they're on the hunt for a microbiome that they can borrow from someone else. To me,
yes, yeah, yeah. And of course, everything really comes from the soil, all the food we eat, and actually the food dogs eat, because, you know, cows, ruminants need to eat grass. And, you know, you should only feed your dog a ruminant, really, if you can, that has eaten grass, and
yeah,
not
for sure.
processed, for sure, you know, for sure. So that's why, you know, not all raw diets are the same, you know, Carol, which you all know.
No, no,
No. So it's really important to research the supplier, you know, to
yeah,
make sure that those animals have lived a happy life, haven't been injected with tons of antibiotics, because we'll absorb those and so will
yeah,
your dog. And then, of course, all of those factors, you know, yes, you're right. I mean, it is the environment, really, you know, because unwittingly, we could be putting antibiotics into our bodies, and that will be affecting acidophilus, bacteria's in there, without even taking any antibiotics as such.
yeah. No, for sure. I think that's what interests me, going back to the antimicrobials out of plants. They're so effective without killing off everything else in the biome. I think they've just been really under. We should look at them far more seriously and see them as a far more medicinal kind of part of the diet than we do. I think we're rather we tread a little bit carefully in there, don't we? Because they're plants and they're not medicine, but they're just so full of stuff for the biome. I think we should go back to that really.
Well, I'm a great fan, you know, of herbs, and I also have used homeopathy a lot and seen that work, you know. So I do believe the power of herbs can be perhaps stronger than pharmaceuticals, to be honest
Yeah,
with you. But of course, yes, we're talking specifically about a compound, but it's an awareness of all the compounds in all of these plants. I think,
yeah,
you know, we do need to go back to, you know, ancient times, really, because
yeah,
back then,
yeah.
people seemed, you know, that's where old remedies come from. That's where I think, you know, herbs are still used today. I mean, for example, I've started to take a herb called Boswellia,
Oh
actually.
yes, yeah, love Boswellia. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
good.
do you? Gosh,
Yeah,
interesting. Yes, yes.
yeah,
And it's got many, many benefits. One of them is, you know, for joints and cartilage, but it's said to be cancer deterring as well, and a great, you know, antioxidant. And that's an old, you know, Ayurvedic herb. But without India using these herbs for centuries and documenting them, we wouldn't know. I don't really know if we've got any great indigenous herbs of the UK. Have we,
yeah,
Carol? Well, I'm sure we
yeah.
have, haven't we? We must have. Rosehip, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, I think um, ivy, actually, ivy berries are really strong. Do you know the plants that come on the poisonous list, the wild plants that come on the poisonous list are contain the most potent chemicals, and you only need small amounts. I don't. It isn't my job to be able to say to people, "This is what you need to do," because I think that's outside my remit. But for my own dogs, I would always pick something. Um, well, like ivy, we've done quite a lot of research on ivy berries, and as long as the doses are very minute, they do act to reduce pathogens very rapidly. And in fact, it was an old Roman, I think they used to use it for gastric disease, but also hangovers. So it isn't as poisonous maybe as we think it is, but it's just in moderation. And I think also there was the thing with herbs where they took off all the kind of strong herbs from if you were training to be a herbalist. I'm sure you'll put me right for it if I'm not reporting this as is, but I think some herbs were taken off because they were quite potent. Would that be right? Off a list, safety list?
They might. I'm not a herbalist. I've just learned about a lot of the properties of different herbs that can be
Yeah,
used, for different conditions. Belladonna, for example,
yeah,
terribly toxic,
yeah,
fantastic to cure fevers. And I've
exactly.
cured kennel cough, actually homeopathically with belladonna. And again, it's working on that like to like philosophy that, of course, Hippocrates, championed all those years ago, along with let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So, and that kind of takes us back to the microbiome. I'm so fascinated. Carol, I mean, you've got these amazing kits that look really easy to use, but that's me talking. I do my own, I send off stool samples and have worm count tests done, so I'm already quite happy to put on the rubber gloves and
Yeah,
put bits of everything into certain little vials and what have you, and send them back. So that's something I would really, really love to do, actually, Carol,
yeah,
because
great.
both Mr. Binks and Prudence have got their own set of problems, and it'd be really interesting to Prudence. Mainly her only problem is she had an enormous anesthetic that has left her very different, actually, to how she was before the anesthetic, brain wise. I think a few brain cells were fried. If she was under for about 6 hours,
Oh,
she had a
wow.
huge, yeah, she was cut in half. She had a huge pyothorax. She had a hole in her throat, and she survived. And she is happy and bouncy and all the rest of it. But something has changed in her following that surgery, without doubt. And it's a shame. And I've it was how long ago was it now? 4 years this October. I've wrangled with myself, should I have done it or should I have done the other? But I couldn't bring myself to kill her. So basically put her to sleep. So I was like, look, just save her life, save her life. So she swallowed part of a plastic fork, you see, in lockdown.
Oh,
It got
wow.
stuck in. Yeah. So, but that's the only thing she's really had. So, but that I knew at the time would have annihilated her immune system, basically, her microbiome. So be interesting to see what her biome tells us from such an onslaught. But and Mr. Binks has a degenerative bone condition. Yeah, I just want to also, and he's been neutered, and maybe see if the biome reflects
Yeah,
Legg-Calves-Perthes disease in
yeah,
his biome, because if it does, then the biomes could be tested
yeah,
before
yeah,
somebody bred from their dog. Do you know what I mean? I mean, maybe
yeah.
there's so much more power for the biome tests, even to work out, degenerative conditions that a
Oh,
dog
no,
might
for
have.
sure. Yeah, for
Really?
sure. Definitely. It would definitely be good for that. I think if people could just grasp the crisis that the biome is in at the moment, and then look underneath to where that, if they don't resolve that crisis, what might happen next. I think that would be the most powerful tool, analytical tool that we have to maintain the health of the dog, for sure.
Absolutely. And I mean, I guess, yeah, to, curb processed foods, be aware of
Yes.
the environment. There's so many stressors in an indoor environment, and dogs spend most of their time indoors, unlike outdoor cats that might spend more time outdoors, and maybe that's why cats are healthier, generally speaking, in the biome than dogs, Carol.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I think we were doing also some work on volatile organic compounds, and even the power of taking a dog for a walk in the wood in the autumn. I mean, that sounds sort of like, well, yeah, we all quite like to do that, but it increases the health by such a good percentage that, if you have got a microbiome that's full of bacteria that's maybe antimicrobial resistant, even doing that, it's just such a powerful thing to do for the microbiome, snuffling about in leaves that are full of these volatile organic compounds plus bacteria that will help restore the biome, is a great thing to do. But I don't think we think about it like that, do we? I don't think, I mean, not that I want everybody to go, oh, well, I've got to just walk my dog for a medicinal walk. You enjoy doing the walk yourself, don't you? But understand why it might be benefiting and what type of environment will give you something more than another type of environment, let's say.
Yes, absolutely. I think it is very important to let dogs be in an environment that a dog likes to be in, which
Yeah,
for me, it's common sense. I mean, in London, it's the Hackney Marshes, it's Hampstead Heath, arguably also Regent's Park, but not so much, you see, because it's been too manicured, in my opinion. You want the wild side of things, uneven ground, natural plants and different grasses, and then the insects around them and all the rest of it, really. That's where
yeah.
dogs should run and play. But lots of dogs don't do that, of course. But Carol, we could talk on and on about this. So in a nutshell, your research and your offering to help analyze dogs and cats, and I guess ferrets as well.
Mm,
And
mm,
I'm sure some of my listeners also have horses. So
yeah,
you're able to analyze any animal microbiome and then report back with the results
yeah.
that are really factual and offer solutions to diet, lifestyle, and the environment.
Yeah, and I think what we do is start with a 30-page report, which is probably enough really for a lot of most people. But what we do after that is do a consultation. So whatever the problem is, people can call us and can tell us all about the lifestyle, and we can just keep looking into the data and targeting it for that problem because the data is so massive. And you could just overwhelm someone to start with. I don't want to give them a report that's completely overwhelming. So we're always here to talk people through and get them to the point where they're getting the information they really need.
So interesting. No, Carol, look, thank you. I know that
Oh, you're
there's
welcome.
another podcast, in this because I'm just so interested. I've just got so many questions. Amazing. I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing you up at the Natural
Yeah,
Dog Expo, chatting some more,
yeah.
basically. And in the meantime, I must get on it like a car bonnet with the microbiome test.
Yeah, no, brilliant. But I think really with the test, what I'm so enthused about it lasts because the information is so good. You can just keep working your way through it and drilling down into it. The thing that we lack the most is the knowledge of what you do to restore the biome. So if you're looking at, say, the gut-brain axis, we don't have enough information about that, but we know enough about plants. It will always be plants that we use because they are the most microbiome friendly. But that's what we lack. We lack the resources really to run at the same speed as the technology is going, which is a shame, but we do our best.
No, no, it's brilliant. One last question is this. So I suppose the big question will be how vets and big pharma accept your research, isn't it, really?
I think in the human field, we always tail the human field. It's really valuable to us. We follow it very closely, and the bioinformatics software links at researchers around the world. It's really forward thinking in humans. I think in animals, it's a bit disappointing that most of it is funded through feed companies. So there's always a kind of a leaning in a particular direction. Um, I'm not sure drug companies will fund that in dogs, because I don't think it's a big enough market. So I think the dogs will lag behind, and that's a big shame. Vets are interested to a point. I think holistic vets are really interested. Other vets come and go. I think a lot of it is because they don't understand it. So we're doing the kind of educational side as well. I guess you can only just hope for the best, can't you, really? I don't know if the drivers are there in dogs. I don't know.
No, I know you can only hope for the best. And this is using technology in a very new way for a very good cause. And I think understanding your dog better and, really understanding the power of the microbiome through human research and then into dogs, I think, in a way, I think it is the sky is the limit, I think.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think somewhere I don't know how you would do it, because there is a kind of human microbiome kind of library project, and I'd quite like to do the same in dogs, but let it belong to the dog owner, the people somehow, so it's accessible all the time. So you're not going to sort of close it off and use it for your own advantage to develop a medicine, or say, well, this is the diet you must feed your dog, because I think it's more important than that, but I'm not really sure how that could be achieved. But I just think it's so important. It should be accessible for all.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think you need to write a book, Carol, first of all. And then I'd like to help you talk about it on the radio a lot. You've got this research that I think needs to be shared, particularly about the bifidobacteria that I've picked up on this conversation today. And I'm sure there's many other strains I hope to learn about as well, by hopefully getting my dogs tested and get their results back. Will open quite a lot of thought, I think, as well. So maybe that can be the next podcast, actually, Carol, discussing the results of Mr. Binks and Prudence's biomes.
Yeah, no, brilliant. That would be brilliant, actually. I'd love that. That'd be really good.
Well, thank you again for joining us today, Carol. And until the next time.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much.
That's our show, Mr. Binks. What did you think? Yes, it is a bit worrying about these proteobacteria, the bad boys. But Carol says they can be good as well, and that's interesting. And you're right, it is time for Woof of the Week. Thinking that living in a sterile environment, eating sterile food, clearly is a little bit illogical. Well, I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, go on, rate and review the show, please, wherever you listen to your podcasts. It's easy and it makes a huge difference. Thanks again, of course, to Carol Hughes for joining us today, and all the links are in the show notes. Thanks, of course, to Mike Hansen for all the music and production as ever. And find out more about Mike at Pod People UK. Find out more about me at my website or at Anna Webb Dogs. What's that, Mr. Binks? Yes, you're right. We will be back in your feed next Sunday. So go on if you haven't already. It's free to subscribe, and it just means you'll never miss another show. Bye for now.
Pod People.